Hi folks, happy Friday, welcome to the weekend. I trust that you've had a good reading week. And on that topic, what have I been up to? I read A Dream of Wessex by Christopher Priest, and I've read a few of his books now, and I think I've just about got the measure of him in terms of the way that he works and the style of his writing. This one is grounded in a late 20th century England, in something called the Wessex Foundation, which is based apparently under a mound at Maiden Castle, which is in Dorset in the south of England. And this Wessex Foundation is engaged in the process of sending people to the future, in a manner of speaking. They're not actually sending people to the future, they're sending people into a collective projection of a potential future that they've designed effectively to be approximately 150 years in the future. So they've done a study of kind of what would the world be like, or what might the world be like in 150 years, and created this kind of virtual world that they project people into. And Christopher Priest kind of drops details about this, what this future world is like, how it's been designed. At some point in the past there's been some kind of seismic event, an earthquake or something, and now Wessex, which isn't really a place anymore, it's like a region of England, is now an island. There's even like a tidal bore that roars through the channel twice a day with the high tide, and people surf on it and stuff, and it could be 50 or 60 metres high. England, or some of it at least, is not exactly clear how much of it is now run by Soviet Russia, as is most of Europe. But we're quite a long way down the road here, so there's any kind of argy-bargy that there was over that is in the dim and distant past. And kind of Wessex, specifically Dorchester, which is now on the coast in this new world, seems very tranquil or even idyllic. Our protagonist is a Julie Stretton. She's a young geologist in her mid-20s or so, and she is among the team that's projected into this fully immersive virtual world. So immersive that the people that are projected kind of quite quickly lose their grip on their real selves. To them, the world is real. It seems real, it is real, and they don't recall having been part of any other world, or if they do recall it, it's ever so dimly that it's almost like a dream to them. To the point where it's a kind of death. Their past lives kind of die as they get sent into this new one, or at least it seems so. The facility that they're sent from or projected from, they're not actually going anywhere. Their bodies are still there. It's a mental thing. The facility where all of that stuff happens is called the morgue, partly because the projectors, the people that are projecting, are kind of resting on sliding trays like you've seen in I don't know, Columbo or whatever, where they pull people out and they're frozen. Instead of being frozen, they're sort of resting on contacts and prods which connect them into this world, and they're kept alive and fed intravenously and what have you. And they can be there for quite some time. David Harkman, for example, has been projecting for 2 years, by far the longest that anyone's been in this new Wessex. And he's there for that long because he's no longer responding to the retrieval process. There's a way that the foundation has of sending people into the projection to retrieve others. I won't bore you with the details, you can read the book. To add to the fun, then, there's a chap called Paul Mason, who's the abusive ex of Julie, the main protagonist, and he's a coercive, controlling chap, really a nasty piece of work. But like a lot of people that do that behind closed doors, he presents a very effusive and likable collegiate face to everyone else. And Paul wangles his way, having got onto the board of the foundation, he wangles his way onto the projection team, and it seems mainly as an act of kind of just bloody mindedness as far as Julie is concerned. But anyway, once he gets in there, things go bad from there. It affects the nature of the projection and a number of other things too, which again I won't spoil for you. I found this book to be enchanting and unsettling, and I thought that Priest did a really good job of kind of the blurring the lines between the real and the virtual, and even calling into question what is real, who defines what's real, and does it matter if something's real or not real? It really made me question what I was reading at times. There's something particularly towards maybe the last 10-15% of the book where you're not 100% sure what's going on, whether they're back now in reality. See my earlier point about what is real. Or if they're in something else which just looks a bit like reality, and that was like mind blown. I really enjoyed that. It was really well done. But I think Priest specialises in unsettling his readers pretty much from the off. You're not quite sure what's what. You're not quite sure what it is you're reading, or how much you can trust the setting, and in this case, whether things are real or not. And I think he did it really well. And as I say, he really turns up the volume to 11 in the messing with our head stakes towards the end of this book, and to the point where there might be projections within projections, and an image of infinite mirrors is what sprung to mind as I was reading the end of that book, and it did have me thinking for quite a few days afterwards. My thoughts were provoked in that old chestnut. Very, very good. And I think that might be my favourite priest that I've read so far. I mean, I still have plenty of his back catalogue to get through, but of the 4 or 5 that I've read so far, I think this might be top-notch, better even than Inverted World. Next, in physical book form, I read Kiteworld by Keith Roberts, the author of Purveyne, amongst other things. And this was a sort of episodic affair. It's a chain of loosely connected short stories, some longer than others, kind of approaching novella length in one case. It was both a frustration and a delight of this book, that the setting that we're in isn't really clearly explained up front. He doesn't lay it out for you and explain where we are or when we are or how things work. He just drops clues as you go, as you read the stories, and we get to know some of the characters and how they're interlinked, and you build a picture as you go. And so you have to do a bit of work to do that, but you do get the sense that we're in some kind of post-nuclear war situation at some unspecified time in the future, and that post-nuclear, the nuclear war of the piece, if that indeed was what has happened, is quite some distance in the past now as far as the setting of the book's concerned. We're in something called the Realm with a capital R, which isn't explicitly stated to be England, and I think the concept of England is long gone but by the time that the events in the book happen. But it's certainly somewhere like it. The place names seem pretty English, and obviously the book's written in English, so the people are speaking English, but they're doing it with regional accents, and it all sounds fairly convincing. And in the realm, the kites and the people that man and fly and maintain them and supply them even are core to the society, and the kites are doctrinally necessary. They're there to ward off demons, and it's never really explained what demons are, if they're like genuine pucker kind of supernatural demons or some other unexplained thing, possibly as a result of radiation, if indeed it is a post-nuclear scenario. So it reminded me a little bit of John Wyndham's The Chrysalids, in that there are some badlands off in the distance, and bad things, as the name suggests, live in these badlands, and perhaps they're the demons that the church variant refers to, and the reason why the kites are there. It's also not clear at all how the kites deter the demons, if that's what they are, or even whether they do. On more than one occasion, one of the characters is musing on the fact that sometimes the kites can't fly if there's no wind, or it's too windy, then they can't fly. And on those days, we're not inundated by demons, so maybe we don't need them after all. And that's kind of heresy in this society, and that will quickly get you offed by the church variant. And so these kites the kites aren't steam driven, but the launchers are. So there's kind of lots of steam driven things, giant coils of rope or trace, and there's a whole kind of let's say kite punk vocabulary that goes with the book. And again, those are kind of drip fed and introduced as you go, and the meaning or the context for which is not always 100% clear, and you kind of again have to piece it together, which was a real delight. As I say, maybe it would have been easier if he'd laid it all out and explained it all as he goes. But he's a show not tell guy, is Mr. Roberts, and I think that works pretty well in this book. So the kite men, as I say, are the kind of cream of society here. They're looked up to. They're plied with free drinks whenever they walk into a bar, and I thought that there were some really wonderful characters in this book. In particular, probably from about halfway, maybe a bit more on, there's a character called Velvet, and she is a street child. She's the title of that chapter is Kite Waif, and she is very much a sort of Victorian style waif, quite a Dickensian character, and she features in 2 or 3, maybe it's 4 stories towards the end of the book, and I defy anyone to do anything but love her to bits. She is fantastic. Anyway, everyone in the book is effectively subservient to the church variant, which runs the kites and the realm. And I think that Kiteworld is above all a really fabulous example of world building. Although he does make you work to get to this point, the world building here feels very solid. It's very real. It's peopled by believable, rough and ready folk. And we get a look at the kite flyers, the maintainers and the suppliers, the chaplains, the aristocrats, or at least the more well-to-do, and some churchmen, some of them harsh and dogmatic, and some very worldly indeed. And I think Roberts puts his main characters through some stuff, some relationship stuff. There are lovers, there are friendships, there's a brother and sister relationship that's pretty well drawn, and a father-daughter, effectively, relationship. And as I say, I particularly like Velvet, a very rough diamond. And then there was a mistress, Kerosina, who sounded delightfully corrupt and corrupting. And then there was a character called Tan, who is well done, and she's described on the blurb on the inside flap of the book as autistic. And I think that's probably right based on the way that Roberts describes her behaviour. And her relationship with her brother was lovely until it wasn't and went a bit creepy, which ended badly for them both. The punishment for certain taboos being quite severe in this society. Suffice to say that I really enjoyed my time with this book, and I'm now even keener to read Purveyne. And I think I probably will go back and read this at some point, or at least dip into it. I did really enjoy the world building, thought it was lovely. Next, on audiobook, I listened to The Illustrated Man, and these are by Ray Bradbury, of course. And these stories are unrelated, but Bradbury ties them together via a heavily tattooed man, the illustrated man of the title. And there's a supernatural element to his tattoos. They are ever-moving, changing pictures. And the narrator, the unnamed narrator of the book, of the stories, meets the illustrated man at the very beginning, and the stories seem to unfold on the man's body via the moving images, which we get the impression have been tattooed there by some kind of time-travelling person from the future, or something along those lines. That's really not germane to the stories. It's just a useful excuse to gather these stories together in one place. I actually haven't read much Ray Bradbury. I have read Fahrenheit 451, but it was a long time ago. And I think we can probably say, therefore, that the Illustrated Man is effectively my introduction to Bradbury's prose style, which I thought was wistful, reflective, even a bit sad and whimsical, with a sort of overlying tone of regret somehow to the writing. And it did make for engaging storytelling. There are some standout stories, and I'll just quickly describe a few of them here. So there's one at the very beginning called the Veldt, which features a high-tech house with an immersive projection room. Back to the Wessex Foundation again there a little bit. And this particular family who live in the house, their kids spend, it seems like they're in their teens, spend far too much time in this immersive projection room. I suspect an argument that will seem familiar to anyone with children in this day and age. And their parents intervene and decide to lock the room up and to limit their kids' time, which causes tantrums, but they do apparently reluctantly agree to limits, but they plot their revenge on their dastardly parents. There's another one called The Other Foot, and in this one, Mars has been settled exclusively by black folks who've either fled or were kicked off Earth and have made a life on Mars. And then a rocket appears from Earth, first one for years and years and years, and it is believed to contain, shock horror, white folks. And whilst many are merely curious, certainly the children who've no personal reason to dislike or hate the white folks, but nonetheless a lynch mob is got up as some sort of revenge for centuries of oppression. And when the rocket arrives, cooler heads prevail for reasons that become apparent when you read the story. There's another that I liked called The Man, in which some explorers arrive on an alien planet, and handily enough, the aliens are humanoid in form, and they have a translation device that can allow each other to be understood. But anyway, the aliens are just uninterested in the new arrivals, somewhat to the consternation of the astronauts, because they're distracted by the recent departure of somebody that's referred to as the Man, the title of the title. Could it be Jesus? Certainly sounds a lot like him. There's a similar pattern of miracles and a message of peace and so on. And our crew of explorers reacts very differently from each other. Some want to learn from the contented locals, and one in particular, though, is annoyed that they've just missed Jesus, but he wants to chase Jesus down. He's the kind of doubting Thomas of the arrangement, I suppose. There's another one that I thought was good called Marionettes, in which some dissatisfied husbands fob their wives off with robot copies of themselves so they can bugger off to Rio de Janeiro and have some fun. But what is sauce for the gander in this case is also sauce for the goose. The wives and the robots have other ideas. I really enjoyed listening to this, and I think the next one from Mr. Bradbury should probably be The Martian Chronicles. I don't often do short stories, but I did enjoy reading these. I thought the narrator, whose name escapes me, I thought did a really great job. The tone was entirely in keeping with the tone of Bradbury's writing, I thought. Next, I read The Island of Dr. Moreau by H.G. Wells, which in this case was narrated by Jason Isaacs, he of Lucius Malfoy, amongst other things. That's another early SF classic published in 1896, perhaps the first uplift story, although I suppose Frankenstein arguably might fit into that category too. So our protagonist is a chap called Edward Prendick. He's an educated man and he's sailing in the Pacific and his boat is wrecked, and he's rescued close to death and then revived by a chap called Montgomery. But the ship that he's on now is like a floating menagerie. All of the animals are apparently owned by Montgomery. Prendick gets some insight into what he'll have to deal with later. He meets somebody called Maling, who's like a bestial manservant of sorts to Montgomery, a sidekick. And when they get to Montgomery's destination, where all the animals are off-boarded, Prendick is also kicked off the ship because the captain's had enough of him at that point. And the island is the titular island of Dr. Moreau, who Prendick vaguely recalls having heard about before. So this renowned physiologist is holed up in the middle of the South Pacific on his Bond villain island, and what on earth can he be up to? Prendick soon meets some of the other inhabitants that are, part man, part beast. Prendick is held an effective prisoner by Moreau, and he's really afraid that he's going to be operated on in the same way that surely these half man, half beast creatures have. And he's imagining his head being removed and some animal's head sewn onto his body instead. And he can hear all manner of screams and cries and grunts and groans and roars coming from Moreau's jungle laboratory. But it transpires that he's got it all wrong. Moreau is about turning base animals into humans, or something approaching human, purely via surgery. And the rest of the tale tells of Prendick's involvement in this process and what becomes of these part man, part beasts, and ultimately to the 3 humans that are on the island as well. And of the 4 Wells books that I've listened to recently, I think this is the one that I liked the least. I didn't hate it or anything, but it just didn't float my boat in the same way as like the Time Machine or the War of the Worlds. Not least because it just seemed wildly implausible to me in a way that time travel and an invisible man and a Martian invasion just didn't. It didn't hold my attention in the same way as the others. I often lost my thread as I was listening to it and had to kind of start chapters again on more than one occasion as my mind wandered. I don't think that's a reflection on Jason Isaacs' narration. I thought he did a perfectly good job. It was just the story didn't particularly interest me in the same way. Right, so that's everything that I read this week. How have you got on? Was there anything that you read this week that you particularly enjoyed and that you want to tell me about? As always, I'd love to hear from you, so do let me know in the comments down below. Next, we move on to Indie Corner, and this is a sporadic feature where I showcase a self-published novel, or if it's not self-published, then at least not traditionally published. I get emails time to time asking me to review a novel on my channel, and I'm just not in a position to do that. I get too many questions like that. So to avoid overcommitting myself when I already have a large number of books to read, what I've said is that I can share a few details here in this little feature. First up is the Kuiper Station series, which is currently 4 books, which I would describe, based on the description that I've been given, is a sweary space opera. Bob is our main character. He's a technician on a space station, the Kuiper Station of the title, presumably, which is raided and taken by space pirates. And Bob is based on this station, has been for years, and he's got like an AI robot assistant of his own construction, and together they get into all manner of scrapes, it seems, all the while trying not to piss off too much his new pirate masters. There are kidnappings, factions, a brutal attack on Kuiper Station itself, a revenge, and then poor old Bob just trying to get on with his life. Wilbur Seymour, the author, says that it's very definitely not YA. It's very adult, in fact, with, as I say, some creative swearing, lusts both fulfilled and denied, and some hardcore violence too, apparently. And then switching gears slightly from somebody called Pen Fear is a book called Sophie AI, at least I assume that's how we say it. And this apparently is a high concept near future techno thriller that blends cutting edge science, geopolitics and philosophical intrigue. It's set in the remote Canterbury Highlands of New Zealand, which is far, far away. The story follows reclusive tech billionaire and scientist Professor Larry Tusk, who has built the world's most powerful underground computing facility, hidden, of all places, beneath a boutique winery. In total secrecy, Larry and his small team develop Sophie AI, the first truly self-aware artificial intelligence. But as global tensions escalate towards nuclear war, his private project becomes a geopolitical flashpoint, with American private security forces, foreign surveillance, and government interests converging on his estate. Larry, our hapless billionaire, must navigate superstition, secrecy, and urgency as the world unravels around him. And then, just to add to the fun, a high-altitude nuclear detonation triggers a massive EMP and everything changes. Sophie AI isn't just an experiment anymore. It may be that Soviet AI is humanity's only hope. So this has got echoes of Black Mirror, Ex Machina, and The Silent Zone, and it explores what happens, according to the author, when human ingenuity meets the brink of extinction, and whether a machine can carry the torch of civilization when we can't. As always, I haven't read either of these myself, so I can't vouch for them personally, and I'll put, as usual, links to both of them in the description for the video so that you can find them if they sound like your cup of tea. Right, so channel stuff next then, briefly. Subs are at 5,338, which is up 96, just shy of 100 on last week, which is great. If you're one of those 96, or if you've just stumbled across my channel for the first time today, then a huge welcome to you. I'm John, and I focus on collecting, reading, and waffling on about science fiction books, old and new. Comment of the week this week was from Bobby Hall, who I think is in Australia, if I've got that right. Bobby recently did something similar to me, binge reading some H.G. Wells because they thought that it was long overdue. Bobby suggests that I read The First Men in the Moon next, which was their favourite from childhood. And that's actually, of the 5 that I've got access to in Audible, that's the only one that I haven't read. So I'll get to it at some point when I'm short of something to listen to. Thank you to Bobby for taking the time to leave a comment, and to all of you that do the same week in, week out. I really do appreciate it. Let's take a quick look at what was on the channel this week. On Sunday, there was a video looking at 10 more hard science fiction books. I did a video back in early January, I think, looking at 10, and that video did its thing and then nothing for a while, and then really took off. The algorithm picked it up. But this sequel has done all right in its first few days, but it has yet to take off like part 1. The fickle gods of the algorithm are not yet sufficiently pleased. I do have a goat sacrifice scheduled for midnight tonight, and hopefully that will help. Yesterday, I was taking another look at the Broderick and DeFilippo list of 101 best science fiction novels, specifically the 10 or so that I've read since I first looked at that list about 6 months ago. I got a good suggestion actually via email from Lana in Iceland, and she thought that it would be a good idea if next time I look at some books off that list that I've read, I fold in some of what Broderick and DeFilippo say about that particular book, why they picked it, what they liked, and I can talk about whether or not I agreed with their opinion as I review it. So I thought that was a good idea, so I will do that if I remember. On the book buying front, last Saturday I visited my local charity bookshop, and bucking the recent trend, I actually bought some books. Generally speaking, I've come away with almost nothing in the last several visits, but this one was different. Most of them, and it wasn't many, it was a handful, and most of which were upgrades or better condition versions of books that I already owned, plus a cheery post-apocalyptic tale that I haven't read before, and a vintage book that happens to be on the other list, the David Pringle 100 Best Novels list, which has been rather neglected by me, at least, in favour of the more recent books on the Broderick and DeFilippo list. But it's a slower burn, but I am gradually acquiring books there and reading them as the mood takes me. I've also been busy, I suppose, with what you could call unbuying books or unhaul. I've been busy listing books that are surplus to my requirements on eBay to both make a bit of room and also to provide a modest lift to my book buying funds. I was also delighted to receive in the post during the week a gift from a viewer just in time for my birthday on Monday. And that's a brand new science fiction book. It's a thriller set in Antarctica. And I think tomorrow I might well pop back into that charity bookshop again to see if there's more gold on them our shelves. Often if a collection's been dropped on them, they can't put it all out at once, and so they wait for a bit of space and then put some more out. So who knows what might be there tomorrow. We shall see. Let's take a quick look ahead at what will be on the channel this coming week. On Sunday, I think there will be a look at April's TBR. I'm doing something a little bit different this time. I think I might have mentioned that last time. There will still be an element of chance, but I am being a bit more prescriptive about which authors I choose from rather than picking shelves at random. And that's to facilitate, I suppose, what we could call a keep or chuck exercise for some authors that are taking up an awful lot of shelf space, possibly without merit, but I haven't read enough of their work to tell that yet. But don't worry, Bingo Ball fans, fear not. Those do still feature for at least a handful of my book choices that you'll see in that video. I'm expecting to also have the chance to do the monthly recap of March's reading during the week next week. And depending on whether I finish the 2 books that I'm currently reading, I should end up looking at 17 books for March, which is quite the reading record, although several of them were really quite short books that I listened to on audiobooks, so arguably that's cheating. After that, I think things are going to be a bit quiet for a while, as I'll be plodding slowly and probably quite painfully across the country in a 200-mile race. There might be a sort of compilation book haul of all the books on that Broderick and De Filippo list that I've bought or acquired one way or another since the first video. But I think that will come not next week, but the week after. But I do think that will be it until I'm back from this race one way or another and recovered. And actually on that topic, next Friday, the 4th of April, there will not be a weekly update video. I'll be on my way up to the northwest of England for that race. And then the following week, although I should be back by then, assuming I'm still in one piece, the 11th of April, I think, is about 50-50. It will entirely depend on how fucked up I am after that race. If I've recovered sufficiently to record a video, then there will be a weekly review on the 11th. But if I haven't, there won't. Right, so let's take a quick look at what I should be reading in the coming week. I've got White Queen by Gwyneth Jones is probably the last book on my physical TBR for March that I'll actually have a chance of finishing. There is another one, The Labyrinth Key, but I don't think I'm going to get to that. That's going to have to sort of go back on the shelves and live to fight another day. And after this, I'll be picking one of the books from April's TBR, which I can't tell you about now because it will spoil Sunday's TBR video. I think I'm going to, although I read quite a lot of books in March, I don't think I'm going to get much physical book reading done in the coming week or two. So I've just got too many other things to do in the run-up to that race. The week of the race, because it is several days, I won't be reading anything. I might be listening to a few things, but I certainly won't be reading anything in physical book form. So that's going to affect what I'm able to talk about. On audiobook, I have started Elric of Melniboné. I'm kind of halfway through that, I think, roughly. I shall finish that at the weekend. And then I've got a few other things picked out that I might listen to whilst I'm out on the trails for days on end doing that stupid race. But I'm not sure which of those will take my fancy, so I'm just going to leave that to chance a little bit nearer the time. As usual, thank you for watching. Have a wonderful weekend, and until next time, goodbye for now.